The nights had been getting longer lately, not by any measure of clocks or seasons, but in the way they felt, heavy, endless, breathing against the windows. I lived alone on the farm before Emily came, my brother's kid. She was 16, all sharp edges and silence, sent to me after her mother decided she'd had enough. City girl plunked down into a world of cattle, cornfields, and hard, dirty work. We got along all right, considering. Emily kept mostly to herself, sketching in a notebook when she wasn't busy with chores. I didn't ask what she'd drawn. I figured she'd tell me when she was ready. If she was anything like her father had been, she'd come around sooner or later. Our old family farm sat a few miles out from town. Beyond the cornfields and the back pasture, the land sloped down into a patch of trees and the broken skeleton of Black Ridge Yard, abandoned grain silos, rusting tracks, and a line of gutted boxcars sinking into the earth. I never had much reason to go near it, and neither did the cattle. They stayed clear, even when grazing was thin. One fateful night, our boring, quiet life came to a sudden end. I still remember everything, still wake up every night. When we were still on the farm, we often coyotes after sunset, high-pitched yips and yowls, sometimes drawing closer, but usually fading into the far-off hills. It was just part of the land's rhythm, something you'd miss if it ever stopped. Coyotes were the only predators out here that could be considered somewhat dangerous, even though they never really attacked anyone. They did get the odd calf, but were not really considered a problem. But then, one Thursday night, something shifted. The usual chorus of howls and barks fell silent all at once, like the land itself was holding its breath. What followed was not the bark or howl of any creature I knew. It was a sound born of something older, heavier, much more unsettling, a long, groaning wail that built into a howl so deep and broken it made my bones ache. It was grief, rage, and hunger all tangled into one terrible note. And in that moment, I knew something had changed out here. Something had laid claim to this area. Something that definitely wasn't a coyote. Emily poked her head out of her bedroom door. "Did you hear that?" "Probably just dogs," I said, though I didn't believe it for a second. But I didn't want her to worry. That's what I was here for. "Go back to sleep," I said, as calm as I could. She nodded but left the door cracked open. I sat in my chair by the wood stove for a long while after that, listening. Another howl came, and then, again, something like a low, sorrowful moan. The next morning, the cattle were spooked. They huddled near the barn and refused to venture west toward the pasture fence. No amount of barking from the dog or prodding from me would move them. That's weird. Usually they'd be quick to respond, especially with Daisy barking and chasing them. "It's like they're scared," Emily said, standing beside me with her arms folded. She looked toward the tree line where the old rail yard lay beyond. Her eyes narrowed. Daisy, our border collie, darted nervously along the fence line, ears flat against her head. I muttered something about maybe getting the vet out next week and went back to fixing the tractor. 2 days later, Daisy went missing. She had become my anchor after my wife succumbed to cancer 2 years ago. Good girl, loyal as the day was long, slept at the foot of my bed every night, always eager to please and comfort me when I needed it. I loved that dog with all my heart. Emily let Daisy out after supper. We never saw her again. We spent the better part of the next day searching. We tried to track Daisy, but the immediate area around the farmhouse, sheds and cattle yards, was crisscrossed with so many dog tracks, it was impossible to tell which ones were fresh. In one of the cornfields further out, though, large patches of ground were torn up. The soil churned and the stalks broken like something heavy had passed through. No blood, no sign of Daisy, just deep, ragged scars and prints in the earth. When I crouched down to examine them, a cold knot twisted in my gut. The footprints were elongated and larger than those of any black bear. Not that we had any bears here anyway. They had been hunted to extinction decades ago. These strange prints were pressed so deep into the dirt, it was as if something impossibly heavy had passed by, something that didn't belong to any creature I knew. Emily didn't say a word, just crouched down in the dirt, staring at the last paw print like she could will the dog back into existence. We followed the trail, weaving through the battered corn, The broken stalks led us steadily west, toward the old rail yard. Every few feet the ground was torn up again, deeper gouges, heavier prints. I kept glancing over my shoulder, feeling more exposed with every step. Emily stayed close, her hands white-knuckled around her sketchbook, but she didn't complain. Neither of us said it aloud, but we both knew whatever made those tracks wasn't really something you wanted to find, at least not without serious firepower, which we didn't have. But I kept going. I owed it to Daisy. She had been there for me when I needed her, and now that I would be there for her, no matter what. The trail carried us past the cornfield and through the back pasture to the far end of the property. There, at the border fence, we found tufts of dark, matted fur caught between the barbed wire strands. 2 of the posts were bent to the ground. Something large had passed through here. The smell was strong, musky, sour, wrong. Beyond the fence, a few hundred yards of trees separated our land from the rail yard ruins. We stood there for a long moment, the sun sinking lower, shadows pooling between the trees. Neither of us wanted to step into that thinning light, especially unarmed. As dusk crept in, we turned back toward the house, silent and uneasy. That night, the howling returned, closer. When the cattle started bawling, I grabbed the old double-barreled shotgun and stepped out onto the porch. The moon was low and fat, casting a sickly pale light over the fields. At first, it was just the uneasy shifting of the cattle, their low moans blending with the wind. I squinted into the distance, thinking I saw something, then nothing. A flash of a shadow near the machinery shed, gone as quickly as it appeared. I tightened my grip on the shotgun, scanning the pasture around the shed. There was movement, something hulking, bent low to the ground, slipping between the tall grass like a shadow, but too tall to fully submerge. At first I thought it was a just cow, but it looked wrong. A distinct hump rose between its shoulders, swaying slightly as it moved. Even through the tall grass, that grotesque silhouette of the hump stood out, an unnatural bulge of muscle or bone that shifted with every step. But I couldn't get a clear view. It stayed just beyond clear sight. I caught a glimpse of something pale against the darker backdrop, exposed flesh, maybe, or bone, before it disappeared once again. The confusion gnawed at me. My instincts told me to shoot, but there were just too many unknowns, and it was too far away. The sound that came from that paddock shortly after wasn't a howl, more like a deep, throaty groan that seemed to vibrate in my chest. A sound so strange and sorrowful it made the night itself feel foreign and wrong. I finally raised the shotgun, but didn't fire. Whatever it was smart enough to stay out of range. Emily appeared at my side, barefoot, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. "It's here," she whispered. "Get inside," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. We both watched the paddock for a while until there were no more signs of the creature. That night, neither one of us slept. We sat in the living room and waited, me with the shotgun in hand. The howls continued, but faded into the distance. The cattle out in the paddocks mooed and screamed all night, a desperate, panicked cacophony. The next morning, there were marks on the shed walls and some nearby fence posts, greasy, foul-smelling smears that looked almost, if you squinted, like something had rubbed itself against them. The fence at the back of that paddock was down. The cattle wouldn't go near the marked areas, neither would Emily. Truth be told, neither did I. But I wasn't ready to give up on Daisy yet. The dog might still be out there, and we had to find out more about this thing, what it was, where it had gone, and how to deal with it. So I decided to head out again. For a moment, I debated whether to bring Emily with me. Part of me wanted her safe inside, locked away from whatever I might find out there. But the thought of leaving her alone, unguarded, felt even worse. In the end, I told her to grab her boots. She was coming with me. This time, I brought the shotgun and plenty of extra shells. We set out again, retracing the trail through the cornfield. Crossing the pasture was worse this time. The sense of dread was almost unbearable. The broken fence looked smaller somehow, but the prints around it hadn't gone anywhere. There seemed to be more prints this time, more chaotic, crisscrossed in a pattern that clearly pointed towards the old rail yard. Some of them were elongated, knuckled impressions, almost like what I would expect from a gorilla. Others had toe-like grooves, wide and heavy, but too big for any man or beast I knew. We crossed the cornfield and headed into the small patch of trees on the far side, the underbrush muffling our uncertain steps. We were both on edge. The area smelled of rot and urine, similar to what I had smelled around the shed. Every so often we found more signs: bark stripped from trees at shoulder height, greasy streaks on trunks, and flattened spots in the brush where something had sat down. I tightened my grip on the shotgun and told Emily to stay close behind me. When we emerged from the tree line into the old rail yard, the silence was oppressive. Massive, decaying grain silos loomed over broken train tracks and lines of old boxcars. The old storage shed stood derelict, half swallowed by weeds and thyme. Vultures circled lazily overhead. We stayed close together as we searched, not wanting to let the other out of sight in that open, lifeless place. The rail yard was bigger than I remembered. Rows of rusting boxcars stretched on and on, with weeds growing tall between warped rails and piles of garbage and old metal. We took our time, advancing slowly and carefully, but the compound was massive, and there was no way we could search every corner of it. We wandered the yard for over an hour, more or less aimlessly. The scale of the place overwhelmed us. Rows of rusting boxcars and forgotten structures stretched endlessly, their shadows long and crooked in the midday sun. Our boots crunched on gravel and weeds, and the silence was broken only by the occasional creak of old metal or the cry of a bird overhead. We searched each cluster of boxcars with growing frustration, finding nothing, but the smell never left us. It clung to the air like a film, thick, rotting, sour, and the longer we stayed, the more it felt like the whole place was soaked in it. As we approached another cluster of boxcars, and just as I started to think we might find nothing at all, a glint caught my eye near a collapsed loading ramp. Something small and metallic reflected the sunlight. I walked over and crouched down. There, lodged beneath a cracked plank, was a shredded strip of red nylon, Daisy's collar. The metal tag dangled limply, scratched but unmistakable. I didn't call out. I just held it in my hand, my throat tightening. Emily stepped beside me, eyes wide. She didn't ask. She knew. We stood there in silence for a long moment, then began inspecting the open boxcars in the area. Most were empty or filled with rusted debris, but one had its door partially ajar, the interior dim and heavy with that same sour stench. I climbed up first and shone my flashlight inside. What we found turned my stomach. Bones, hundreds of them, piles of gnawed remains mixed with rotten meat and tufts of fur. The floorboards were slick with old blood, black and dried at the edges, and near the back, in a tangled heap, lay what was left of Daisy. I froze. My breath caught somewhere between my lungs and throat. Her body was mangled, half consumed, her once beautiful white fur soaked through with dark, disgusting fluid. Her head looked like it had been broken in two by impossibly strong hands. I stared for longer than I should have, willing my mind to deny what my eyes so clearly saw. Tears welled up. I blinked them away, then gave up and let them fall. Daisy had been my companion through the loneliest stretch of my life, the last piece of love that still followed me room to room, morning to night. She didn't deserve this. Not like this. No animal did. The grief came fast and sharp, tempered only by fury. I turned away and climbed back down, throat tight, hands trembling. Emily didn't ask to look. She didn't need to. I buried the collar in my pocket. It was time to leave. Neither of us wanted to be here when the light faded. As we made our way out of the compound, we found the beast's trail again, prints leading in seemingly random patterns through the yard. More than one set looped back toward the woods, like it was frequenting that area. That unsettled me more than anything. The woods ran right back toward the farm. This thing was venturing out towards our land regularly, and it would almost certainly come back. I had to do something. That afternoon, after getting Emily settled inside with some food and clean clothes, I went down into the basement and dug out the old bear traps. My grandfather used them back in the day for coyotes, wolves, and mountain lions. Nasty things. Must have caused the animals unimaginable pain, but it was all I had, other than my trusted old shotgun. The traps were heavy and grim, but they still worked. I tested each one in the dirt floor and oiled the worst of the rust off the springs. Emily helped me set them, one each by the front and the back door, 2 around the machinery shed, 3 around the barn. We laid them out carefully and covered them with fresh grass, working in silence, both of us understanding without needing to speak. After I washed my hands at the pump, I started making phone calls to the neighboring farms. Not many folks left out this way, mostly older folks like me who never left, or families too poor to move elsewhere. I warned them there was something dangerous prowling the area, told them to keep their animals locked up and their doors bolted. Most were polite but skeptical. A few listened. One voice in particular stood out. Marla Jennings, a widow about my age who ran a small cattle farm a few miles east. When I told her what we'd seen, there was a pause on the line. Then she said, quiet but clear, "Something's been happening out here too. Couple of my yearlings disappeared last week. Fence was torn, found blood. Thought maybe it was a cougar, but maybe not." We talked for a while, comparing notes. She didn't laugh or call me crazy. In fact, she asked if she could come over that evening to talk more, maybe over supper. Said she didn't want to be alone tonight. I told her, of course. I didn't want to be alone either. Of course I had Emily, but she had never fired a gun before. Marla had, and she brought her own shotgun. So I started dinner and set out a third plate. The house smelled of roasted vegetables and steak by the time Marla arrived. Emily helped me prepare the food, her silence a little softer than usual. When Marla stepped through the door with her shotgun slung over her shoulder, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief that we weren't alone. Guilt that I hadn't made time to get to know her better before all this. Marla had a presence about her. Tough, practical, and sharp-eyed, with a calmness that steadied the room. She nodded politely to Emily, then gave me a look that betrayed anxiety and fear. We sat around the table, plates steaming, while the dusk light filtered through the kitchen window. Conversation started slow. At first only small talk about the cattle and the weather. Then it turned to the elephant in the room. "I saw it 2 nights ago," Marla said quietly, picking at her food. "Or part of it. I thought it was just my imagination until your call." "What did you see?" I asked, setting down my fork. She looked at me square. A shape, big, moving strange, a massive, deformed hump between its shoulders. It walked strangely like it had too many joints, you know? But what stuck with me most was the head. It wasn't shaped right. It had this elongated but somewhat bulky snout, more like a bear than a wolf. But the proportions were all off. The jaw was huge, jutting forward like something broken and rebuilt wrong. And the eyes, God, the eyes. One of them glowed in the porch light, cloudy and bloodshot. The other just looked wrong, sunken, almost rotten. The whole thing looked like a cross between an ape, a wolf, and a bear. It passed through the tree line near my chicken coop. I have never been so scared in my life. We fell quiet. I nodded slowly. Emily barely touched her plate, but she listened hard, her eyes flicking from Marla to me. The silence was broken by a metallic snap outside. Then a cry I'll never forget. A shriek that started low and grew into something awful, something full of pain and fury. A howl, twisted and broken, coming from the direction of the machinery shed. All 3 of us stood at once. Marla and I grabbed our shotguns as if they were a lifeline. "It found one of the traps," I said quietly. We moved quickly, flashlights and shotguns in hand, hearts pounding from the sound of that tortured shriek. The air outside was thick with tension and dust, and the smell hit us the second we stepped outside, a mix of rust, piss, and blood. One of the bear traps had gone off somewhere around the old machinery shed. Marla and I went to investigate, moving carefully, eyes scanning every direction. Emily stayed on the porch with the flashlight sweeping the area, her face pale, knuckles white. We approached the machinery shed slowly, shotguns and flashlights raised and ready in our trembling hands. Each step felt like it might be the one to trigger something worse than we could imagine. Marla kept to my right, sweeping the beam of her light across the yard in nervous arcs. We could hear our own breathing and the thudding of our boots in the dirt. Everything else had gone still. Then we saw the bear trap. The metal jaws were twisted open, Blood smeared along the teeth and splattered on the dirt around it. Whatever had been caught in there had torn itself free. Clumps of dark, greasy fur were scattered in the grass, and deep gouges marked where claws had raked the earth. A low growl echoed from the tall grass, about 100 feet away from the shed. We turned in an instant, pointing our guns towards the paddock. Then we saw it, just a shape at first, crouched in the grass. The light of our torches barely reached that far, but we could see the thing's outline, hunched and swaying. I didn't hesitate. I aimed my shotgun and fired. The blast lit up the yard for half a second. The creature let out a shriek, staggered backwards, then vanished into the tall grass. Marla fired too, but it was too late. Then came the circling. It didn't give up. It didn't run as any normal animal would. It stayed close, just beyond the reach of our lights and weapons, always moving, always watching. We heard it growling, loud, wet, uneven, and sometimes a low moan that almost sounded human. Every time we turned and aimed our shotguns, it had already moved. Every time we stopped to listen, it went quiet. It was testing us, probing our defenses, and doing it with purpose. But it wasn't stalking us. It was slowly moving towards the house. We realized it too late. It was trying to get to Emily. That damn thing was smart. It knew exactly what it was doing, adapting to the situation and exploiting our stupidity. Marla shouted and swung her light around, catching just the briefest glimpse of a massive, hunched shape slinking past the side of the old wooden farmhouse. We rushed back toward the house. As we approached, we heard the wooden boards of the porch at the back of the house creak, then a heavy thump against the wooden door. It must have spotted the trap there and had managed to avoid it completely. That damn thing was learning quickly. The door gave way with a deafening crack. We reached the porch just in time to hear Emily scream from inside. She must have retreated into the house at some point. I scolded myself for leaving her exposed like that. How could I have been so stupid? Furious, I kicked the shattered back door aside and stormed in. The smell hit me first. Hot, foul, almost burning. The kitchen light was still on, flickering. The beast wasn't there, but the sound of its heavy movements echoed from the hallway. I crossed the room quickly and caught a glimpse, massive, hunched, dragging its weight past the bathroom door toward the front of the house. Emily screamed again, from somewhere down the hall. The beast rounded the corner at the far end of the hallway before I could get a shot off. I advanced, heart hammering. Marla was right behind me. The hallway was narrow, and the floor groaned under our steps. Suddenly, the creature peeked around the corner, one massive clawed hand gripping the frame for balance. 5 fingers, a thumb, like a primate, like a human, but the head looked canine, somewhat. Its broad, elongated jaws hung open, thick ropes of saliva swinging from its yellow, irregular teeth. One eye was milky and dead, the other one glared straight at me. In that moment, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. This wasn't an ordinary animal. Some grotesque hybrid, maybe? My mind struggled to make sense of it. Those hands, that head. What the hell was this thing? It was like something caught mid-transformation. Nature and nightmare twisted together. One word came to mind, werewolf. But I didn't finish the thought. It bared its teeth at me and I fired. The sound was deafening and the slug slammed into the doorframe, less than an inch from its skull. The creature ducked back immediately, growling. The sound so deep it made the walls vibrate. The creature didn't try to stand its ground. It bolted. Its huge frame twisted and launched itself toward the stairwell. In 2 lurching steps, it was at the base of the stairs, then hauling itself upward like a wild ape, using hands and feet, claws digging into the walls. "It's going after Emily!" Marla cried. The wood groaned under its weight. I didn't think. I just ran, not bothering to reload the shotgun as I went. I had only fired one of the barrels. We thundered up the stairs behind it, floorboards shaking under our boots. The hallway upstairs was barely wide enough to navigate, with shadows flickering from the light in Emily's room. A door slammed, then a scream. I reached the top just as the beast lunged at the bedroom door, smashing into it with its full weight. The wood cracked, but held. Inside, Emily was screaming. I aimed and fired the second barrel. The round struck the massive, bare hump on its back. It shrieked, reeled, and spun, claws slashing the air, but it didn't go down. It doubled down. With a guttural roar, it hurled itself at Emily's door a second time. The hinges groaned, then snapped. The wood gave way with a violent crack. Marla fired over my shoulder as the beast crossed the threshold, hitting the back of its thigh. It shrieked, but vanished into the room. "Emily!" I screamed, charging after it. Inside, I saw it dragging its bulk across the floor, reaching for the bed. Emily was crouched in the far corner, eyes wide with terror. I didn't hesitate. I rushed forward and swung my empty shotgun against the thing's head with all the strength I could muster, knocking it off balance just as its large hands reached for the edge of the bed. It turned with a snarl, swiping wildly, and I barely ducked in time. I threw myself between the beast and Emily, shoving her back with one arm as I waited for the next swipe. Before it could lunge again, Marla's second shot rang out, sharp and close. The blast grazed the side of its skull, tearing away a patch of matted fur and skin just above its ear. The beast recoiled with a howl of pain, its body twisting violently away from me. Blood splattered across the wall. It staggered, momentarily stunned, and swiped blindly at the air. Then, seemingly deterred by the pain, it turned and lunged for the window. Its bulk hit the frame with a crash, shattering the glass and splintering the wood. The entire wall shuddered as its mass tore through it. We rushed to the broken frame just in time to see it hit the ground hard, tumbling once across the yard. It scrambled to its feet, off balance and limping, but still terrifyingly fast. For a second, I thought it might bolt for the trees, but instead, it turned sharply and made a beeline for the barn. "No," I whispered. "Not again." It disappeared into the shadows, the barn doors groaning as it forced its way inside. The barn was a maze of old equipment, hay bales, and collapsed beams. A perfect place for that thing to hide. Going in after it at night would have been suicide. I looked at Marla, both of us catching our breath. She didn't need to say it. We couldn't let it escape either. It would simply come back, and next time, we might not be so lucky. "Let's go. I have an idea," I said. We made our way down the staircase, cautious but quick, avoiding the shattered glass and gouged walls. At the front door, Marla paused to reload her shotgun, hands steady despite everything we'd just been through. I stepped out ahead of her and veered toward my old truck. The jerry can sat in the bed, where I'd left it days ago. I grabbed it, slinging it under one arm as we moved toward the barn. The barn loomed ahead, dark, quiet, the large front doors wide open. The doors on the other side were barricaded. As strong as that thing was, it wouldn't be able to break through there. Only one way out. Marla kept her shotgun up, sweeping the entrance while I quietly approached the doors. We wouldn't go inside. We'd burn it to the ground. Mustering every bit of courage left in me, I closed the heavy doors and secured the old, heavy lock. The thing was trapped in there. I splashed the gas in an arc across the outer wall, soaking the wood and the dry grass clustered along the foundation. The scent was sharp and bitter. Marla stood firm, shotgun trained on the front entrance, her face covered in sweat. For a moment, everything was still. No movement inside, no sound from the fields. I struck the flame and dropped it. Fire roared to life, climbing fast. Within minutes, the barn was a silhouette of orange and black. Then the noise came from deep inside. Movement, crashing, a sound like something massive raking at timber. It was still in there, trying to find a way out. The fire crackled louder now, beams collapsing inside with sharp pops. The crashing turned frantic, something throwing itself against walls, clawing the thick wood, shrieking in rage and pain. Marla tightened her grip on the shotgun. "It's trying to find a way out," Marla muttered, never taking her eyes off the doorway. Then we heard it, heavy footfalls charging toward the front. A deep thud shook the doors. Again, once more. Then they burst open. The beast exploded out, half covered in flame, trailing smoke and blood. Marla fired both barrels the second it broke out into the open, the twin blasts booming across the yard. But the shots missed, too high, too rushed. The creature didn't even flinch. It just powered through the fire and smoke, barreling toward the fields beyond. It vanished into the darkness before either of us could reload. Emily left the next morning. I packed her a bag and called her mother, told her everything short of the details that would make her hang up on me. She didn't ask many questions. Emily didn't either. She just hugged me tight at the car door, eyes tired but dry. "Don't stay here," she said. Then she was gone. I had no intention of staying. After she left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the wreckage. Splintered walls, blood in the hallway, the smell of soot lingering in the air. I couldn't stay. I threw some things in a duffel and drove over to Marla's place. She didn't ask questions either, just handed me a blanket and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. A few days later, we walked the farm one last time. The barn was gone, just a scorched frame and ash. The pastures were empty, the fences broken in multiple locations. I called the realtor the next day. Marla did the same. The night before we left for the city, as we sat on her porch with her dogs at our feet and shotguns still leaning nearby, I asked her, "What do you think it was?" She was quiet for a long time. "I don't think it was just an animal, not something natural. Too smart, too mean." "Do you think it was a werewolf?" I asked, feeling stupid for even considering it. Marla didn't laugh, didn't even blink. "I think if stories like that exist, they had to come from somewhere." She sipped her whiskey and stared out toward the yard. "Something got twisted out here. Maybe it came out of a lab, maybe not. But that thing in your house wasn't just some animal." She paused for a minute. "I don't know what to call it, but it walked like nothing I have ever seen, not even on TV." Her voice was flat, final. I felt a chill crawl down my spine despite the warmth of the whiskey. Whatever we'd fought wasn't finished. It was still out there, and maybe it wasn't the only one. I didn't sleep much that night, or any other night after that.